Welcome, viewers, to the series Exploring Careers in Global Security. This episode is entitled Alliances and the Future of American Leadership. My name is Drew Platt, Middlebury class of 2020.5, and I'm thrilled to introduce this episode's guest speaker. I'm joined today by David Wisner, Middlebury class of 2004. David is currently the Deputy Director of Press and Strategic Communications and the spokesperson for the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs at the Department of State. Thank you for joining us, David.
Drew, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So starting off just generally for our viewers who don't know, I was hoping that you could give us a general overview of what the State Department does and how certain facets of the work done at DOS fit within the realm of global security.
Well, Drew, it's a good question and not always a simple one to answer. The State Department, look at its core, is the executive department of the U.S. federal government responsible for the nation's foreign policy and its international relations. Abroad, the State Department is the lead agency in coordinating approach to any given country, and the State Department fundamentally is centrally involved in all matters of national security, be it economic, political, or security. As a permanent member of the Security Council, the UN Security Council, there's virtually no question in the world that the US does not engage on. And as a result, the State Department is either via the bureaucracy in Washington or via our embassies abroad are basically lead actors in policy making and the policy formulation process, obviously with other actors in the US government, but also increasingly, as we'll start talking about later, other entities, non-state actors, cities, state governments, NGOs, and even individuals when it comes down to it. So the State Department is, obviously is the oldest cabinet agency, but is also sort of redefining itself in the 21st century.
Thank you so much. And so as you mentioned in that answer, the State Department does a wide variety of different things. There are many different facets. I was wondering if you could hone in on what your particular role is there now and how that fits into the national security landscape, or the international security landscape rather, specifically speaking about strategic communications and how that fits in.
Yeah, if you'll let me, Drew, since I know a lot of our viewers here won't necessarily be familiar with the way the State Department works, but there's essentially, so I'll start a little higher level. There's essentially three types of employees at the State Department. There are civil servants, there's the Foreign Service, and there are political appointees. Political appointees, probably the easiest one and very apropos to, today, January 2021, are people who come in and out with the various administrations. The civil servants are usually subject matter experts, be it human resources, be it nuclear issues or human rights issues or anything sort of in between. And there are people who encumber a job at the State Department and work at the State Department, and usually outside of limited sort of circumstances don't usually go abroad. And then there's the Foreign Service, who are commissioned officers of the United States, like a military officer, but without all the cool, fancy, different, outfits and the such, and having to, be on the front lines of combat, although we do sort of work in war zones everywhere. We are basically, as Foreign Service officers, I am a Foreign Service officer, we're basically broken down into 5 different specialities: political officers, economic officers, public diplomacy officers, management officers, people sort of involved in managing the day-to-day affairs of an embassy, or back at the department, some question on management, or consular officers, who are the people who, A, take care of American citizens abroad, and B, sort of run the initial aspects of entry into the United States by foreign nationals. So I am a political officer by formation, but I am actually doing right now a public diplomacy job. And that is running the press and strategic communications effort for the Middle Eastern Bureau, which is in our talk, it's the Near Eastern Affairs Bureau. It's a bit of an Orientalist throwback to the way it used to be. And what we do, in essence, is explain US policy to Middle Eastern audiences, be it via traditional or social media or through public diplomacy programs. And we're also actually responsible for driving our efforts to counter misinformation and disinformation of state and non-state actors, including countering violent extremism.
Thanks so much for that answer and for that really helpful breakdown kind of the employment chart within the Department of State. I think a lot of people will find that really, really helpful. I noticed you mentioned at the end talking about misinformation, obviously something that becomes increasingly important across the globe with respect to global security. I was wondering if you would feel comfortable speaking to what other major themes might look like in the near future, or what you see coming down the line with regard to foreign policy and diplomacy specifically, and how those themes will interact with international security.
Yeah, again, a terrific question. Look, America stands at a crossroads. We are confronting a series of very serious issues. Obviously, the pandemic and other elements of sort of global health challenges to include COVID-19. The corresponding economic downturn, which is being felt virtually the world over, the deepening climate crisis, a changing international landscape and an emerging global power competition, and then real problems here at home. A racial justice crisis here at home. And so, the traditional distinctions between domestic and foreign policy are different today. And I think, everyone who is concerned about American power abroad needs to be thinking about American power at home. But that being said, I would say that I firmly believe that the United States of America is well positioned to take on these challenges. I'll turn to your first question about the Middle East specifically. Look, I think you're seeing a bipartisan consensus that the strategic competition with China is really going to be the defining element of the 21st century. China poses, challenges to our security and our prosperity. However, I personally work on Middle Eastern issues. And I'm very confident that the Middle East will remain central to American foreign policy going forward. Be it, the continuing challenges posed by terrorism, the continued importance of hydrocarbons to our energy future, our important alliance, incredibly important alliance with Israel and other partners in the region, and frankly, our engagement with young and vibrant communities that make up, the Middle East. It's a big population set with a lot of challenges, and it's close to European allies, it's close to our African allies, it's it's Near and Eastern. So we've got a long time that we'll be engaged in the Middle East going forward.
Absolutely. When you talk about building those relationships, I wanted to get back to something that we touched on briefly, and just wondered if you could highlight how the role of strategic communications, people might not necessarily associate that with something that's pivotal to international security. But I think that there are many reasons that it is. And I was wondering if you could highlight how those two themes that many people might not associate fitting together really in many ways do.
Yeah, look, we can do all of the good stuff. We can pursue strong policies, we can develop close ties with governments. We can, sort of bring ends to wars. But in the end, you got to be able to explain it. And a big part of what we do as diplomats, I like to sort of think of us as translators. We both explain the United States to foreign audiences, and then vice versa, we explain foreign audiences back to principally, government policymakers, but not only. We engage with the business community, we engage with think tanks, we engage with the media back here to explain why we pursue policies that we pursue. Because in a democracy, in a vibrant democracy, the popular will must be brought along. And when you're then talking about abroad, you also need to be engaging with audiences abroad in language that mean something to them. And all too often, you can run into the trap of saying, well, that sounds good to an American, but does that also sound good to someone from Sudan? Or does that sound good to someone, from Vietnam? Everyone sort of requires different cultural engagement and nuance. And so when we think about strategic communication, that's how it is. It's, fundamentally, it's selling the United States.
That's super helpful. Thank you so much. Now I think we'll move to a topic I'm really interested to learn more about based on our preliminary conversation, a little bit about your Middlebury career and how you got from there to where you are today. So what did you study at Middlebury, and how did that impact your career choices?
So I majored in political science and minored in history, in European history. I'll be honest, the minor in European history sort of happened senior year. I found out I think I was 2 classes short of a minor, and I said, I might as well do that. But I'd always been interested in sort of policy making and history. And so I knew quite early on in my time at Middlebury, that's the direction I was going to go in. I also would say, and this is something that, you don't maybe appreciate at the beginning of your time at Middlebury as much, but, I played rugby, and my teammates were from Fiji, Canada, the United Kingdom, Kenya. And then I had, obviously friends from all sorts of other countries in my class. And Middlebury, despite the fact that it's like 3,000 some odd students, has this international outlook that is just not normal for a lot of places. And if I had one piece of advice to the viewers of this, is take advantage of it. Meet new people and take advantage of that diversity that Middlebury has, and really enjoy it.
That's fantastic advice, and I completely agree. Building on what you said about how you always knew that policy, the political science led to that interest in policy, and these relationships with people from all over the world inspired you to pursue international relations. I would love to hear briefly how you got to where you are today after graduating from Middlebury.
Yeah, well, so I sort of bounced around a little bit. And again, if you'll forgive me for imparting a little bit of advice onto people, is like, you don't need to decide right out of Middlebury what you're going to do. Go do some cool stuff. When you're in your 20s and you don't have a whole lot of responsibility, it's a cool time to go out and see the world. So, I taught at a school in Morocco my first year out of college. Then I did kind of the Middlebury thing and worked at an investment bank for a little while. I didn't love that. It wasn't up my alley. I learned a lot about myself, but didn't love it. And then I went and interned on a French political campaign, and learned how a very different political system worked, and realized how, despite the fact that my mother's French, how un-French I really am. And then, sort of moved into, then I went and studied language in Yemen for a little while I was trying to join the State Department. So I bounced around a bit, and I'm really happy I did. And it was always with that goal of building a skill set. So, I don't know, maybe there are some things you could do that wouldn't be really a great skill building, but, you can figure out ways to learn continually through life. And that's really what I tried to do.
Absolutely. That's really fascinating. And it seems that you were a bit modest in omitting some of the positions that you held at State after figuring some of those things out. I mean, working all over the world and as a desk, or all over the Middle East and North Africa as in embassies and as a desk officer here in the United States. From what it sounds like, there's no typical path to getting to these positions. So instead of asking that question, what I'll ask is it normal to kind of bounce around within the State Department, or once you get there, are there certain trajectories that are more well-defined? And how did you find that experience?
Well, so like I said at the beginning, sort of that difference between the political appointees, the civil service, and the foreign service. It's all kind of different, right? Political appointees, you come in and out with whatever your political affiliation is, and you usually hold a job or a couple jobs within the time of, within the time that the administration that you adhere to is in power. The civil servants, they can also move around very easily, or not very easily, I should say, but they can move around. But what they do is they encumber a job. So a civil servant can stay in a job for as little or as long as they might, be interested in. And usually they're hired for expertise. So you are a terrific widget maker, or an analyst of widget making, probably more specifically for the State Department. Or, you have a background in international law. So you join the legal advisor's office, or, you have a history in human rights promotion. And so you join the democracy and human rights office, and you encumber that job. Foreign service officers, it's slightly different. You usually move around, be it within jobs in the department or abroad, every 1, 2, 4 years, really. The typical posting abroad lasts 1 year if it's in a high threat zone, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, those types of places, Pakistan, Afghanistan, or as long as, 4 to 5 years, depending on how long you want to stay in a place. Average stay, I would think, is probably usually 2 to 3 years. And then back in Washington, you sort of go through, you can go in any sort of number of directions. What I love about being a foreign service officer in particular is really you get to do something new every couple of years. And you get to take on a new challenge. You can go to different parts of the world. You can specialize if you want. But what's cool about the State Department is it really is it's what you make of it. And the harder you work, the cooler the jobs you're going to do.
That's awesome. I know personally, I'm really excited by the prospect of many of the things that you just discussed as someone who is interested in international relations. So I think kind of get into the meat of the program and what a lot of students both at Miss and at Middlebury might want to start talking about is, what are the entry level points and what advice you have for people about building out experiences or skill sets to get to those entry level points.
Well, so again, it's different to join the civil service, different to be a political appointee. You better hope that, your guy or gal wins the election so that you can get appointed. That's its own beast. And, oftentimes the way that people get in is, through the think tank world or working on a campaign. That's oftentimes how people sort of navigate their way in. But by and large, the political appointees are usually pretty senior. I mean, there's some more junior, but most of the jobs are on the more senior level. Civil service, there's a couple different ways. There's some fellowships. There's some different programs that help you get in. And then there's also USA Jobs. I think it's usajobs.gov. I think is the website where you go, you log on, and you can see literally jobs that have been posted, and that's how civil servants join. And then foreign service officers join through a test. And it's a competitive test. It's a written test and then an oral examination. And then if you pass it, you move on and you join the department. And yeah, so that's kind of how it works. So in order to be a foreign service officer, and I think it's how you be a civil servant, you basically need 2 things. You need to be an American. You need to be, 3 things, I guess. You need to be American, you need to be 18, and you need to have a high school degree. And then you got to either pass the test or obviously get hired through the USA Jobs program. Now, I'd also like, if you wouldn't mind, sort of talking, to folks, who government service, and I would argue specifically the Department of State, to be a diplomat of any stripe requires, all shapes, colors, creeds, sizes. And the department needs to be a more diverse place and sort of reflect America better than it currently does. And so, listen, I urge anyone who's interested, but especially people who identify as of a minority, to look really hard at the Foreign Service or the Civil Service as a way to go. They're really interesting fellowships called the Pickering and Rangel Fellowships. If you Google them, you'll find them and figure out how to get involved. And I would be always happy to talk to a Middlebury current or current or future or former Middlebury grad. I'd also point out diversity of experiences is key. I think I may be a little bit off here, but my entry class, which was 12 years ago, it was 2008. It was about 50-50 male, female, but it was probably 55% grad student, 55% undergrad. I think it was plus or minus in there. We had former military, we had like a CEO of a business who like just wanted to go travel the world and work for the US government. We had a 22-year-old right out of college, I had a poet, we had a doctor, we had, it takes all types. So, if I had, if I could offer something to people who are watching this, if they're still watching after all my babbling, is just get out and experience. And service to the United States, is really a special thing. And that's, actually where I'd probably finish this point is that, all Middlebury students are privileged in our own way. Each one of us, how lucky we were to get a Middlebury education. And in my personal view, there is really no higher calling than public service, and in whatever form that might be. And a really great way to do it while getting to see the world is to do something like join the Foreign Service.
Absolutely. I might have to go look into joining right after this call. It's really inspiring. So it seems pretty clear that there's no one distinct path.
Right.
It kind of takes all sorts of experiences. I think that is part of what makes those job opportunities and the people getting to know people who you're working with really special. But because this is broadcast by the CCI and I am kind of trying to help students prepare, I would say instead of what specific experiences should students be looking to do before this, what are the kind of the skill sets that they might want to focus on? I loved how you talked about that earlier. You were doing all sorts of different stuff, but you were building a certain skill set. What skill sets should students be thinking about building, whether that's language or other things? And then what kind of person might be a good fit, even from within all these different backgrounds? Is there a kind of person that might be especially suited to some of these?
All good questions. Look, I probably have like 6 or so points to make. One, take advantage of the opportunities of Middlebury. I wasn't until I left that I realized how much I missed, how much I didn't do, how much I should have done. Take advantage of not only the programs, but take advantage of the liberal arts education. No other form of education turns you into the rounded individual that a liberal arts education does. And that's, if you want to get into the State Department, we're all generalists, we say. And having that liberal arts background, I took everything from, film class to oceanography to, hard political science classes. Round yourself, make yourself a complete person. That's one. Two, learn a language. I didn't really learn a language. I now speak French and Arabic. I didn't really learn languages at Middlebury, and I was a doofus for not doing that. I should have taken it more seriously, and I didn't. But Middlebury, you have these facilities, and you have the ability to 3, go abroad. And so do your junior year abroad. Don't do a semester. Do a full year abroad. Go experience some other country, some other culture, some other way of learning. It'll make you a more rounded person. 4, meet new and interesting people. It can be easy to know the people that but get out, meet new people, learn about them, learn how they tick, why they tick, what they're doing. And that's what's cool about Middlebury, because you got people coming from everywhere with all these different backgrounds. 5, I would say test your boundaries and your limits. I'm terrible at math, but I took an oceanography course, and trying to get into science and learn and push yourself. So that liberal arts education allows you to push your boundaries. Also, it's tied to getting out of the country and going to new places and test your limits, figure out who you are and what you are. And then, lastly, I would just say, take advantage of your good fortune, man. take advantage of your good fortune of being at Middlebury, of not having, too much responsibility. Get out, meet new people, try new things, do new stuff, and really, benefit from the community of really smart and interesting people that are around you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wisner, for that fantastic advice and for speaking to us today. It was a fantastic overview of what happens in the Department of State and all the different really exciting and diverse pathways to get to those positions.
Yeah, listen, it's my pleasure. Again, I am always happy to talk to Middlebury graduates and current students and soon-to-be students. So if you ever want to email me and talk to me about, careers at the State Department, my email address is wisnerdg, Delta Golf, at state.gov, and happy to help out.
That's extremely generous. Thank you again. This concludes this episode within the series Exploring Careers in Global Security. In closing, I want to encourage viewers to tune in and get career perspectives and advice from a number of other professionals in a broad variety of organizations and other episodes in this series.